Welcome, everybody. Today's lecture is on accessing and utilizing USDA programs. Throughout this course, the Heroes Hives course, we talk a lot about USDA and different kind of things that you can do with USDA. This lecture is specifically meant to give you a familiarity with USDA, how to get started with working with USDA, and then just a very brief overview of some of the things that you can do with USDA as far as programming is concerned. So let's get started here. All right, so applying for USDA programs is something that you want to be thinking about as a farmer. So USDA provides a wealth of services to farmers in general. And just like other federal agencies like the Department of Defense that we're all very familiar with, there's many layers of these departments, lots of sub-agencies, and organizations that you're going to be working with to basically get access to the resources that USDA has available to farmers in general. So USDA, big, huge organization, just like the DoD, with lots of sub-agencies, lots of kind of individual organizational pieces that come together to create this massive agency. This agency, a lot of the USDA is funded by the Farm Bill, which is one of the largest single pieces of legislation that's passed through Congress every 4 to 5 years. And so a lot happens within USDA related to agriculture. So let's talk a little bit about what you can expect working with a big old organization like that. So as we said, you are all familiar with the Department of Defense. Big, huge organization, lots of paperwork, lots of confusing forms, all of these types of things that we're all familiar with from the military. USDA is no different. And so what you can expect, and I know, many of us have heard this in the military, the hurry up and wait mentality. It's going to be a lot of the same of that with USDA. So just get your mindset ready. Get back to that military mindset and, just expect to wait. It's going to take time to get through these programs. It's going to take time to get you registered, not only for, farm number registration is pretty quick. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. But when you get into these other programs, once you get into the USDA, once you get into these other programs that you start utilizing, it can sometimes take 6 months to get an application to go through. You may not get approved the first time you put an application in for a program, so you may have to reapply over and over again. So you need to be persistent, and you don't want to give up. That's the big thing. I know it can be frustrating when you spend time putting something in, say applying for something, and you don't get it. I get that. But, the old adage, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, it is 100% true in this situation. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years of reapplying for a certain program to finally get accepted for that program. Keep in mind that a lot of these USDA programs that I'm going to be talking about today are competitive programs. They aren't just there to give you something. You actually are competing with other people. So that's important to understand as well. So just be aware that as you start working with USDA, you need to practice your patience. And I know that can sometimes be hard, but you've got to just understand that this is a big machine that we're working through to get the services that USDA provides to us as farmers. All right, so let's talk about our farm and USDA. So this is maybe an ideal kind of hobby farm for some of us. So, you got the farmstead, we've got a farmhouse out here. We got our barn. We've got solar panels on here. We have a tractor. We've got manure management. We've got a fuel management. We've got a greenhouse. We've got some bees and some pollinator habitat here. And we've got some four-legged livestock as well with some fencing as well. So maybe this is what you want your farm to look like. Maybe this is bigger than you want it to be. But just understand that when you're looking at something like this, there's a lot of moving parts to a farm. And USDA, the way that it's situated, the organization itself, all of these sub-agencies within the organization are actually going to take care of different types of programming. So this is just to give you an example. Now, I want to say this before we really get into the weeds of all of this, that before you do anything, after we go through this lecture and you get your forms together to get your farm number issued, which is the first step to working with USDA, is getting a farm number issued for your farm. Without that, you cannot do anything with USDA programming. That is the first step, and that's what we're going to cover in here. But what you want to understand is that first step That's the gateway. And then you're going to be working with several different sub-agencies to make something like this, a holistic farm, a realization. So let's kind of back up a second and go through kind of what are the sub-agencies you would work with to kind of create something like this. So let's talk first about Farm Service Agency. So the Farm Service Agency is the gateway to USDA. That is the organization that's going to issue your farm number, and that's what we're going to be covering in the forms that I'm going to cover here in just a little bit in this lecture. But the FSA also is the loan provider for the USDA. So things like operating loans, farm loans, things like that, those are going to be through Farm Service Agency. Now, Farm Service Agency is there specifically to help with individuals who cannot qualify for traditional lending. So keep that in mind. USDA loan programs typically are for individuals who cannot qualify for conventional lending. So most people, when they're going to get a farm loan, they're going to go to a regular bank, an agricultural bank likely. Farm Credit is the organization that's nationwide that is basically the lender for farmers, and was actually created by Congress a little over 100 years ago. So the farm credits that are all around the country, and here in Michigan, it's Greenstone Farm Credit. Where you live, it's likely going to be called something else in a different state. But that is a lender for agricultural purposes. So equipment loans, farm loans, things like that, even operating loans, things like that. Those are all going to be offered through a traditional lender. Now, if you cannot qualify to get a loan through a traditional lender, then that's when the FSA opportunity opens up for you. So, great opportunity for folks who may have, blemishes on their credit or something like that. A lot of folks, you get activated, you're overseas, on deployment. Most of us are not thinking about credit card bills and things like that while we're on deployment. Maybe your credit took a little bit of a hit. That's what FSA is there to do, is to help with those individuals who cannot qualify for traditional lending. So that's one area that you may be able to access as part of USDA. FSA also provides equipment loans, like I mentioned, and also operating loans as well, for you to operate your farm. And now the nice thing about FSA loans, like I said, you have to not be eligible for traditional lending. So this is, if you get declined by a traditional lender, you go to FSA. The nice thing about these loans is the terms are kind of flexible, so FSA will work with you on that, and the interest rates are very low, so very attractive that way. But a tractor, you're going to get that through FSA's operating loan. FSA will also provide operating loans to help with livestock purchases as well. So if you wanted to get some cattle, you could work through FSA for that. Now, another sub-agency that we'll talk about today is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. NRCS is the main sub-agency that provides programs that help with all sorts of different kind of conservation pieces to a farm. And most of these programs through NRCS are cost share programs. So, for example, maybe they'll pay for, say, for their hoop house program, maybe they'll pay for 80% of a hoop house, and that's a cost share program that they provide. In this situation, NRCS also offers a prescribed grazing program where you can actually get fencing to keep your livestock in as part of a prescribed grazing program. That's a conservation practice. And that's what NRCS is focused on, is conservation practices. Another conservation practice might be manure management. So actually managing manure runoff and things like that, that would be where you can get some funding, some support from NRCS. Now, NRCS has many different programs, but one big program that they have is called EQIP, which is EQIP. That's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And that's what the manure management program's under. So even within these sub-agencies, they will have special programs for certain things. Now, these programs generally are around the United States, but some of them are location specific. So you're going to want to check with your USDA office once you get registered with them for your farm number to see kind of what programs are available in your area. So these are just examples of programs that are available through USDA. So that would be another one. NRCS also manages a fuel program as well, so fuel storage facility program. They also offer the Hoop House program, which is one of the NRCS's most popular programs. We have had hundreds of veterans that have gone through the Heroes to Hives program and have gotten hoop houses through the EQIP program. If I remember correctly, this is an 80% cost share, so you basically pay pay for the full cost of the high tunnel, and then you get reimbursed up to 80%. Now, that's one thing to keep in mind with a lot of these conservation programs, is that they are reimbursement programs. They are not going to give you a lump sum of cash up front to install a conservation program. What they do is you put the conservation program in place. After you're approved for that conservation practice, you put that in place, and then USDA comes and evaluates to make sure it was installed correctly, that it's doing exactly what it's designed to do, and then they release payment. So you also have to keep in mind that a lot of these are not programs that they're going to give you money to do things. The loan programs are different, but these other programs that I'm talking about, especially the conservation programs, you're going to be coming out of pocket first for these programs and then being reimbursed for them. And on our farm, we've done many of these programs. The last one that we did was the forest management program. So we have about 32 acres of forest on our land that we manage, mainly for maple syrup. And we have a forest management plan that was through USDA. We paid for it out of pocket to have a forest management plan done. And then once it was approved, after it was completed, once it was approved that it did what it was supposed to, according to USDA, we were reimbursed for that amount. So things to keep in mind, but those are other programs that are available to you. NRCS is a great organization to work with, and you're going to be working with them a lot. That is the main sub-agency you're going to be working with within USDA for most of the programs that you're going to be looking for what you're doing as small farmers. Habitat for pollinators. They have a habitat cost share program for pollinator seed as well. So as beekeepers, having pollinator habitat's really nice, and pollinator seed is very expensive. USDA can help you with that cost on that. They also have developed local seed mixes as part of this program. So you also can get help on like what plants should I be planting? How should I be planting it to install habitat? So great service there as well. Another sub-agency within USDA is rural development. Rural development has many programs focused on rural America. And so, like, for example, we have solar panels here. That would be something you would get through the REAP program, the Rural Energy for America loan program, which helps rural America basically install solar energy and the ability to use solar panels on their farms. So another program that you could work with in a different sub-agency. So another sub-agency to work with, rural development. And then rural development also can provide lots of other things, like this particular one. If you're looking to get into, say, a processing facility, we would look to the rural development and their value-added producer program for something like that. So there's also opportunities for you to do kind of expansion on your farm as far as business development by creating something like maybe your area doesn't have a meat packing facility and you want to be that meat packer. That's an example of something that you could do through rural development. So lots of different sub-agencies to work with, lots of different programs within these sub-agencies. But before you take advantage of any of these, the very first thing you're going to have to do is get a farm number. A farm number is a number unique to your farm that is issued through the Farm Service Agency. And every farm that wants to work with USDA has to be issued a farm number. Now, you may be thinking, if you're a small scale farmer, you may be thinking, well, I'm only farming an acre. That is still a farm, and that is still can be issued a farm number. In fact, the smallest farm that you can get a farm number issued for is a 20 by 20 space. That's 400 square feet. That's most of your backyards that you can literally register as a farm, so that you can start taking part in some of the USDA programs that are available to you. And I'm going to talk about a couple here. One in particular that I'll mention just right up front as a beekeeper. One program that is available is the NAP program and the ELAP program. And we talk about those in the risk management lecture that you had in previous modules. And so those are programs that help you with mitigating loss. So if you lose your bees due to a climactic event, that's an insurance. Those are insurance programs that help you recover those losses, whether bees or honey, depending on what has happened. So there's also kind of insurance programs for us as well. So, don't just think that like crop insurance as a program is for big scale farmers. Crop insurance is for everybody, and even small scale farmers. My farm, we've used crop insurance when we've had really, really, devastating winters as far as we had one winter a couple of years ago that we had, I think it was 20 days of minus 10 degrees weather. And that is hard on bees. We saw extreme losses throughout the Upper Peninsula that year. And that's where crop insurance comes in. Insuring your animals, basically. So something you want to be aware of, and you can even be a small farmer and participate in these programs. Okay, so let's cover the forms themselves. I'm going to basically walk you through the 4 forms you have to have in order to register your farm with the USDA. Now, before I get started into the actual documents themselves, you probably want to understand why you have to fill out these forms. Well, basically these forms, what they're doing is they're connecting you, your farm, the actual physical property, and your tax records all together. And the reason that they're doing this is because in order to participate in lots of these programs, you have to qualify, and income is something that they use to qualify. If you're making $1 million a year on your farm, USDA is not going to support you with many programming as far as like programs to help underserved farmers or limited resource farmers. There's a lot of specialty programs to help farmers that are getting started or that are from disadvantaged groups like veterans. There's lots of programs to give them a leg up. And so you have to understand that even when you get into the USDA and start working with them, there's going to be forms that you're going to be filling out all the time. You're going to have to recertify. You're going to have to fill these forms out over and over again. I think we just filled them out again this year for our farm. And so just understand that as you're going through this process and as you register your farm with USDA, there is going to be maintenance to this. It's not like a one and done type of thing. You are going to, as you register, you're going to continue to work with USDA. You're going to be reporting numbers to them annually if you're participating in certain programs. That's where data comes in, record keeping for your beekeeping. So understand that these forms are important and they're doing something specific. Like I said, they're bringing everything together so USDA can make determinations about your eligibility for programs. So the 4 forms that you have to register with USDA, and in this module, those forms are also attached as handouts. So you can print them out, you can bring them to your USDA office, or you can just go to your USDA office and request them. But the 4 forms you're going to need are the AD 2047. So you all are familiar with the DD designation of federal paperwork, the Department of Defense, like like all the DD forms that we've had to fill out over the years, including your DD 214, right? So these forms in the agriculture department, AD forms, that's what we're seeing here. So all these agencies are going to have different forms. So you've seen stuff like this before, so don't be intimidated by it. So the first form you're going to have to fill out is the AD 2047. That is the updated customer data worksheet. That's basically an intake form to basically understand who they're working with, you as an individual. The HELC, the AD 1026, is a highly erodible land certification, and so this is specific, that particular, and wetland certification. That particular certificate is to determine if you have wetlands or highly sensitive areas to your farm as far as ecosystems are concerned. So the first form, they're taking your information in. The second form, that highly erodible landscape form, that is specifically to see kind of what is the condition of your land as far as what does it look like. And they'll actually they'll have an aerial photo that they'll bring up on their computers as you're going through this process with them. And they'll bring your land up and they'll say, okay, you wrote that you don't have any, wetlands or anything like that, but I can clearly see there's a huge wetland just from this aerial photo. So they're going to, this is a certificate. They're actually certifying your wetlands through this certificate. Very important certificate because wetlands are very sensitive areas and are in general with USDA are not to be developed. And if you are planning on developing a wetland, usually there's a huge, well, if you want to work with USDA, usually that's a huge no-no if there's been identified wetlands and you do something to them. So keep this in mind that there are going to be some, guardrails around what you're doing on your farm when you're participating in programs like this. The CCC 941 is the adjusted gross income certificate. So that's where they're going to connect your tax records to you. And then the last form is the CCC 860, which is the Limited Resource Beginning Farmer Certificate. So that's actually identifying if you belong to a limited resource category, a beginning farmer category, or a socially disadvantaged category. And like I said, there's special programs and opportunities for those categories within USDA. So let's talk about these 4 forms and go through them so that you know exactly what you're getting yourself into as you walk into a USDA office. Okay, so this is the first one. This is AD 2047. These are updated kind of inconsistently. This is the 2021 update, and as you can see, the expiration on this, if you're looking at the top of the form, is the end of 2023. Typically, these are extended unless there are revisions done to them. So I think the last version of this before the 2021 version, which you see is denoted under the AD 2047 designation in the top left corner, that is the date. The updated version of this is in 2021. Usually, I think the last update before this was in 2014. So these are not updated, every year. But this is the most recent version of this. So I'm not going to go through all of the verbiage in these. I'm just going to tell you kind of what the highlights are of what you should be filling out. So this is basically, if you are already a customer of USDA, you're going to go update existing customer records. Most of you are going to be new customers. If you have never worked with USDA, or you may have bought a farm and there may already be a farm number on there, you're still going to be a new customer, even if you know there's a farm number with it, because that farm number is connected to somebody else and that land. So there has to be a new connection between you and that land in order to do this. And that's what they're doing here. So you're going to be a new customer likely, your customer's full name or business name and address, the customer business type. So are you an individual like a sole proprietor? Are you a corporation? Are you an LLC? Something like that. Your home number, your business number, your mobile number, your email address. Question 2G says, does the customer want to receive sensitive but non-personal identifying information, producer or farmer-specific related email? So this basically means, do you want to receive emails from USDA about some of your stuff that's going on and programming and things like that, but they're not going to send any sensitive information where you can be identified. That's the PII. So that's if you want to receive emails from USDA regarding programming and things like that, check that box yes. If not, check no. Taxpayer identification number. So you're going to need your either social security number, your EIN, or your ITN, one of those numbers, depending on what business structure you're actually part of. Your birth date is only required if you're a minor, and none of you should be in that boat if you're participating in this course. As a veteran or some of our dependents are underage, but so if you are a minor, that's what you're going to click, check right, or put your birth date in there. All right, so let's go to the rest of the form. So I'm just kind of paging down the form because I want you all to be able to read this as you're going through this. The next one is demographic information. And this is an important area that's been recently added to the 2047. And what I want you to understand is that if you want to qualify as a socially disadvantaged group, you've got to fill this out. If you don't care about it or don't want to, then you don't have to. You can say, like right here, I don't want to provide my race on the race question. I don't want to provide my ethnicity on the ethnicity question. I don't want to provide my gender on the gender question. Or you can say, I don't want to provide my gender information at this time as well under the gender legal entity identification. So if you don't want to answer these questions, click those boxes. If you do want to answer these questions because you think you may be part of a socially disadvantaged group, or you just want to provide demographic data to USDA, this type of data is important to understand who USDA is working with. So click those. Whatever you think is appropriate for you, click those boxes in there. All right, so then the last part of this form, question 5 right here, customer has interest in one or more of the following agencies. Now, typically, you're probably not even sure what most of these acronyms are. I've told you what a few of them are today, but what I would recommend, because these are the main agencies that you work with for programming, I would recommend clicking or checking FSA, the Farm Service Agency, NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, Rural Development, and the Risk Management Agency. Those are all ones that you're going to be using quite frequently. Okay, so if you're working with honeybees and if you're, want to take the full scope of programming, now just because you click these doesn't mean that anything's going to happen. It's just letting USDA know what your kind of interest is as far as who you want to work with. Now, one thing I should have mentioned a little bit earlier is that most of these sub-agencies are co-located in service centers. And I'm going to tell you at the end of this how you can get in contact with your local service center. But most of the time, Risk Management Agency, NRCS, FSA, usually those three agencies, not those three. FSA, NRCS, and Rural Development. Typically, those three agencies are typically co-located in service branches throughout the United States. Risk management, you might not see that all the time, but they're always going to be able to provide you services. It just may be that there's, not in that service center specifically. Other thing that you're going to see on this form is the customer and multi-county producer. If you're producing in multiple counties, then you are a multi-county producer. Now, as a beekeeper, you may be thinking to yourself, well, am I a multi-county producer if I have beehives in several different counties? The answer is yes, you're a multi-county producer at that point because you have beehives in several different counties. If that's the situation, you're going to put yes, and you're going to list the counties and states that those operations are located in. And then the last thing you see on the bottom here is your customer signature, title, those types of things. That's the AD 2047. Pretty simple form to fill out. And none of these are really difficult forms, these 4 forms. So don't let them be overwhelming to you. Just kind of move through them, read what they're saying, and understand what those descriptions are. Oh, before I skip to the next slide, the last thing I should have mentioned was this sentence right here. A customer identified in 2A, that is the legal entity, must base responses to race, ethnicity, and gender on individual persons holding at least 50% ownership. So when you do this demographic information, you're listing the demographic information for the individuals that have 50% or more ownership of the business, okay? So if you want to be a veteran-owned business, having 50 or 51% veteran-owned, that's what you're going to be doing. If you want to take advantage of some other programs or something like that, where maybe they're not veteran specific, then you may want to have another designation. It just depends on what you want your business to be designated as. If you're 50 and 50, maybe with a partner or something like that, maybe your designations are multiple because there's 2 50% owners. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to the highly erodible land conservation certificate. Now, this is a very important form. When this is issued, this is not something that we end up doing a lot of recertifying of this. This is typically when you sign up with USDA, this is going to be a certification that you're going to get and you'll want to keep with very important records like the deed to your land. This is a very important certification to have because what it does is it identifies potentially vulnerable areas ecologically on your property. And so that's why USDA does this. Wetlands are very important to ecosystems, especially as a filtration device for a lot of contaminants and things like that, in addition to just a diversity of wildlife, both vertebrate, invertebrate, and plant species of wildlife. Very important places. So we want to make sure that we're protecting these habitats when we have them on our land. That's part of being a steward, a good steward of your land, is understanding the role that you play in the support of your own ecosystems, and that in turn leads to healthy bees. Right? Healthy ecosystems are going to give you healthy bees, and wetlands are really important forage resources. Can be very valuable forage resources for honeybees. So keep this in mind. It's not like we're upset because we have a wetland on our land. I wish I had wetlands on my land because of what they provide. So let's talk about this form. So what we're going to do, we're going to put the name of the producer in here, our tax identification number, the crop year that we're in currently, and then the names and persons affiliated with this farming interest. Now, the first question that we have here, number 5, check one of these boxes if the statement applies. Otherwise, continue to part B. Now, the first A. And you're going to check one of these if this applies to you. A, the producer in Part A, which is this part right here, does not have interest in land devoted to agriculture. Examples include, examples include beekeepers who place their hives on another person's land, producers of crops grown in greenhouses, and producers of aquaculture, and these producers do not own or lease any agricultural lands themselves. So, the reason that I point this out is because you saw the beekeeper statement. You do not have to be a landowner to be a beekeeper. It's one of the beautiful things about beekeeping is you can be a farmer without actually owning land, because lots of people want your bees on their land. If that is you, if you do not have a piece of land that you are operating as a farm, meaning putting crops in the ground, if you don't have that and you are just a beekeeper that keeps bees on other people's property, that would be you. You would check box A. Now let's go to box B. The producer in part A meets all three of these statements. Does not participate in any USDA program subject to the highly erodible landscape conservation and wetland certificate compliance except federal crop insurance. Only has interest in land devoted to agriculture, which is exclusively used for perennial crops except sugarcane, and has not converted a wetland after February 7th, 2014. If those three statements don't apply to you, you do not check that box. If they do, you check the box. All right, let's move to the next part of this. Now, the next part is part B. These are the actual compliance questions about the wetlands or potential wetlands on your land. So let's go through this. You're going to indicate, as you see, you're going to indicate yes or no to these questions on this table here. The first question, number 6, during the crop year entered in part A, so if it's 2023 is the crop year, that's what we're talking about. The term of a requested USDA loan did or will the producer in part A plant or produce an agricultural commodity, including sugarcane, on land for which an HEL, a highly erodible landscape determination, has not been made. So, if you have not, if you're not producing on an agricultural commodity on land which has no HEL determination, you would write, or excuse me, if you're producing land on a piece of land that does not have a certification to it, an HEL certification, you would write yes on that you are producing crops. Has anyone performed since December 23rd, 1985, or anyone performed any activities? 2, so number 1 or 7A, create new drainage systems, conduct land leveling, filling, dredging, land clearing, or excavation that has not been evaluated by NRCS. So what they're getting at with these questions is they want to know if you have done any major land projects before there was a certification for highly erodible landscapes and wetlands. They want to make sure that you didn't take out wetlands on your land when you're filling this out. This is what we're trying to determine here through these compliance questions is, has this been done before you started working with us? Now, because it's been done doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to work with USDA. It's just they have to know what's going on your land. And if they pull up an image on Google Earth to do your certification and they see a huge wetland there at one point that is now gone, they're going to have questions. And it may mitigate your ability to participate in some programming. That just is what it is. But they're trying to get at these questions. So, number 7B, have you improved or modified an existing drainage system that has not been evaluated by NRCS? Maybe you had drain tiles in a field and that has not been evaluated. Something to think about. Or maybe you improved them or modified them before there was an evaluation done. Something to mark there as well. All right, and you see the note down there before, right below C, 7C, maintain an existing drainage system that has not been evaluated by NRCS. So if you have a drainage system in place, they're going to want to see it as well and see how that's being maintained. You see that the note below here says if yes is checked for 7A, 7B, then Part C must be completed to authorize NRCS to make an HELC and or certified wetland determination on the identified land. If yes is checked for item 7C, NRCS does not, NRCS does not have to conduct a certified wetland determination. So if you're maintaining an existing drainage system that's not been evaluated, but you've been maintaining it, then you don't need to have this conducted. All right, Check one or both boxes if applicable below. We're on number 8. Check this box if the producer in Part A is FCIC reinsured crop insurance, and filling this form represents the first time the producer in Part A, including any affiliated person, has been subject to HELC and WC provisions. This is likely not going to be you. If you're a new producer, you're not going to be reinsuring a crop, okay? If that is you, then you know this is you because you're already participating in these crop insurance programs, okay? But if you're new to this and this totally seems foreign to you, then you're not participating in the FCIC reinsured crop insurance program. The next one, B, check this box if either of the following applies to the producer and crop year entered. Is a tenant on a farm that will not be in compliance with HELC and WC provisions because the landlord refuses to allow compliance. So maybe you're renting land and the landlord's not allowing you to do any sort of compliance, but all other farms not associated with the landlord are in compliance. You see, is a landlord of a farm that will not be in compliance with HELC and WC provisions because of a violation by the tenant on the farm. So these are both situations in which the farmer is a tenant on the farm. All right, additional information. If you said yes in item 6 or 7, you need to provide some more information here. So you're going to provide the farm and or tract or field number, what activities are being done on there, what the current land use is as far as crops that are being produced on there, and then what county it's in. And this is so that they can verify that information. So that's the HELC and wetland conservation certificate. So that particular form, 1026, this one here is a very important form. And like I said, you want to keep this with your deed once it's issued. The next one is the CCC 941. The CCC 941 is the average adjusted gross income certificate and consent to disclosure of tax information. This is literally the form that connects you with your tax information and your farm. So this is a very important form because, like I said, eligibility does relate to gross income when it comes to your eligibility for a lot of USDA programs. So let's take a look at this form. All right, so this is a pretty easy one to fill out. Name and address of the legal entity, including the zip code, your taxpayer identification number, and then we get into Part A, the certificate of your average adjusted gross income. The program year for payment eligibility, because this is to determine if you're eligible for certain programs, so you're going to be receiving payments many times. Enter the year for which program benefits are requested. So if it's 2023 that you're requesting benefits, you're going to write 2023 in there. Likelihood is that if you're applying for 2024 benefits, you're going to write 2024 and so on, right? So whatever year you're getting ready to produce in, that's what you're going to write there. The period for calculation of the average AGI will be the 3 taxable years preceding the most immediate preceding complete taxable year for which benefits are requested. So, for example, if it's the beginning of 2023 and you're applying for 2023 benefits, but you haven't had your 2023 taxes done, you're going to be using 2022, 2021, and 2020 tax returns in order to make this statement. So that's an example. You're using the 3 preceding years to the year that you're going to be producing it. Now, the next question is, I certify that the average adjusted gross income of the individual or legal entity in item 2 for the year included in item 4, so if you're saying that you're going to be producing in 2023, you are going to be stating that you made less gross income than less than or equal to $900,000, or you made more than $900,000. Those are the 2 questions. And it's your gross income. It's not your net income. It's your gross income. So, did you meet one of those criteria? Check whichever one it is that you met. So, if you're below 900,000, click that box. If you're above, click that box. All right, so now this is a bunch of legalese on the back of this form, but basically what you're going to be looking at when you're looking at this back part of this form is I just wanted to really draw your attention down here by signing this form section, and you can also see it in the consent to disclosure of tax information. But basically what both of these areas are telling you is that this is connecting the IRS with your farm and you. So now the USDA is going to be able to connect those dots so that they can determine your program eligibility. You also have to sign this, date it, and the title of your position. All right, so the last one that we're going to cover today is the CCC 860. Now, the CCC 860 has gone through some changes in recent years following the 2018 Farm Bill, and these changes have been primarily, I would say, from my perspective, primarily negative to veteran producers. Veterans, military veteran producers. And so we'll go through this form, and I'm gonna basically lay it out for you why this is the way, or not why it is, but how it is. I can't tell you why. This is something that lawmakers did. But what I'm gonna kind of preface this with is that this form right here is how we determine what is called preference within USDA programs. So when you apply for these competitive programs, they have actually what's called veteran preference. It's a term in USDA. And if you are a veteran, a veteran as defined by USDA, I have to be very careful about how I say this, because the definition of a veteran for USDA is different than every other federal agency. The federal definition of a veteran, which is a US code, USDA has made changes to that definition within USDA programming, specifically within the Farm Bill. So what I want to tell you is that as a farmer veteran, as a veteran of the military, or even if you're active duty, you are going to have limitations placed on your ability to get veteran preference. Now, what that does, what veteran preference is, and why it's so important, and why it was even put in place, is because USDA recognized that we wanted to bring veterans into the fold. It make veterans the next generation of American farmers. And so what they did is they installed veteran preference for USDA, for certain USDA programs. A lot of NRCS programs, like I mentioned, the EQIP program, this would apply to. So the way it works is that you apply for a program. Say we're going to apply for the Hoop House program through NRCS. That's a competitive application. You're put into a pool with everybody who's applied for that particular program in your area. And then those applications are ranked. The more times you apply, the higher your rank gets. So it is something that a lot of times you have to reapply for. And if you're in a very populated area, these are very competitive programs. If you live like where I'm at in the middle of nowhere, you're going to have a lot less competition. But if you're in the DC area trying to apply for a program like this, it is going to be highly competitive. But keep in mind, the way that they have made it so that veterans get a leg up is that they put veterans preference in place. And what that does is that if you qualify as a veteran, and we're going to talk about that in this form, your application is essentially taken from the low priority and placed into high priority for funding. There's low, medium, and high priority is how USDA ranks applications for these programs. So essentially, you're taken from the bottom of the stack and put on the top. And because of that, veteran applications to these programs tend to get approved at a much higher rate than a civilian. And so you may apply for a program once and get funding, as opposed to someone who's not a veteran may apply many times and still not get funding. So it is a very advantageous thing to have veterans preference. But let's talk about the limitations to that in this form. So the first thing I want to lay out is, again, we've got your name and address, basic. Certification of socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. That's part A. Now, USDA has their own definitions for this. So they're asking that they're asking basically, are you a woman or are you a member of one of these groups? American Indians, Alaskan Natives, Asian American, Black or African Americans, Native Hawaiians, or other Pacific Islanders and Hispanics. If you qualify as one of those groups, you're going to check that box. If you're a woman, you're going to check the other box too. Those are the socially disadvantaged categories of USDA, and those are codified in law through the Farm Bill. That's what this is defined as. So these are the definitions of socially disadvantaged farmers within USDA, and there's very good reason for this. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but the USDA has a long track record of very discriminatory practices up until the 90s and 2000s. There have been huge class action lawsuits against USDA specifically for discrimination. And those lawsuits have been won both by Black farmers, Hispanic farmers, Native farmers. All have had major lawsuits that have gone through. Some of the biggest lawsuits that have ever been levied against the US government are through the USDA. So there's a good reason that this form is in place, because USDA has a historic reputation of being a discriminatory agency. And like I said, this is up until the 90s and 2000s where discriminatory practices, particularly for loan programs, were being put in place where black farmers could not get farm loans from USDA because of the color of their skin. So this is something very important to understand and not to be minimized whatsoever, because this is USDA's legacy when it comes to working with socially disadvantaged groups, which is why they want to understand who are socially disadvantaged groups, because there are specific programs to help those individuals within USDA work with USDA. Okay, so those are the two socially disadvantaged farmer rancher programs or categories. The next one that you're going to do is you're going to fill out Part B, which is certification of a limited resource farmer or rancher. So socially disadvantaged is different than limited resource. Limited resource is more related to your income. And so I'm going to show you how you actually determine if you're a limited resource farmer. You're going to actually see this link right here. You're going to click that link. It's going to take you to a website that's going to allow you to put your location, both state and county, and it'll give you what the total amounts are for being considered socially disadvantaged. It's going to ask you some questions, and it's going to tell you if you're socially disadvantaged, or if you're a limited resource farmer or not. So you don't have to guess on this. You basically go to this tool right here. It's a self-determination tool, and you're going to go through that process. And I'm going to show you that here and right after we get done with this form, what that process looks like. If you are considered a limited resource farmer, you're going to check that box, but that's after we go through the self-determination tool. And I'm going to show you that here in a moment so that you can see if you actually are going to be checking that box. The next one, Part C, certification of a beginning farmer or rancher. If you have been farming for less than 10 years, you are considered a beginning farmer. It doesn't matter how old you are. But if you are new to agriculture, maybe you retired from the military and this is a second career, maybe you've only been doing it for a couple years, you are a beginning farmer. So if you are a beginning farmer, I certify that the following statements are true by checking the box and providing the date I began farming. I have not operated a farm or ranch for more than 10 years, or I have substantially participated in the operation. So if you are less than 10 years, you are a beginning farmer. So if you basically, and you can see, you're going to put the date and year that you began farming here. This is a self-certification. So, there's no way to audit this. I mean, if you don't remember what month you began farming in, put a month in there, but you get as close as you can to that. So that's how they determine if you're a beginning farmer or rancher, and there are special programs just for beginning farmers and ranchers. If you've been working in agriculture for 30 years like myself, you are not a beginning farmer. I'm sorry to break it to you. You're not a beginning farmer, and those programs do not apply to you, even though some of them may seem attractive. All right, the next one is the most important one for us, is the certification of a veteran farmer or rancher. Now, this question says, I certify that I am a farmer or rancher who has served in the armed forces as defined in 38 U.S. Code 10110, and I meet all the requirements of at least one of the boxes below. This is a very contentious certification within our group of veterans. Why? Because previous to the 2018 Farm Bill, if you served in the U.S. military, you are a veteran by USDA standards, which is the definition of U.S. code for a veteran, is that you served in the U.S. Armed Forces. What USDA did in the 2018 Farm Bill is they put sunset clauses on what it means to be a veteran when working with USDA. And now, if you have been, let's look at the two choices. I have not operated a farm or ranch for more than 10 years and began farming in. So that question right there, A, is getting at if you're a beginning farmer or not. It's the same thing with Part C. They're basically asking you, when did you start farming? So if you've been farming for more than 10 years, that means that you are not a beginning farmer again. But it also means that there are limitations put on you as a veteran, because when we look at number B, I am a veteran who first obtained status as a veteran during the most recent 10-year period. What does that mean? So what do these two things mean right here? It means that if you've been out of the military for more than 10 years, you are not considered a veteran by USDA standards, and you are not eligible for veteran preference. As messed up as that sounds, I know all of you that have served Gulf War, Vietnam, I mean, literally, even myself, a post 9/11 veteran who got out in '04, I don't qualify as a veteran in USDA terms. And let me just tell you how upset I was, having been part of working with USDA for way more than a decade. I had always had veteran preference, working from 2014 on, and then all of a sudden, when we go to recertify our farm a couple of years ago, I wasn't even provided this form because my FSA agent knew I had been out for more than 10 years. So I wasn't even provided this to fill out. I asked her, why didn't you give, I'm a veteran. I should be able to state that on the socially disadvantaged and limited resource farmer rancher form, Triple C 860. And she said it's because you don't qualify for it anymore because the laws have changed. So this is something that you all should be very upset about. And if you are upset about this, contact your lawmakers, contact your senators, contact your congressmen, congresswomen, contact those people and tell them that the sunset clauses that are part of the USDA's beginning farmer, rancher, and farmer veteran programming is unjust. Because you think about it, not all of us decided we wanted to be farmers right after we got out of the military. Sometimes it takes a few years to figure out what you want to do once you leave the military, right? That transitional period is devastating for a lot of us. Who the hell's thinking about what the career path is that we're going on when we're just trying to survive? This is something that USDA has not thought through. I shouldn't say USDA hasn't thought through it. The Senate and the House Ag Committees, those are the two organizations, those are the two committees that lead Farm Bill writing. Those two committees and the individuals that are on them are the individuals you should be contacting if you're upset about this. But there's nothing you can do right now. If you've been out for more than 10 years, you do not get veterans preference through USDA any longer. I'm sad to say it. But that's what this question is getting at, is they want to know if you've been out for more than 10 years. It's very unfortunate. And to make it even worse, so this is for NRCS and FSA. If you work with the risk management agency, it's 5 years after discharge. And you're no longer eligible for veteran preference within those programs. It's ridiculous. I don't know who was the lawmaker who thought this was a brilliant idea, but we need to make our voices heard, friends. Make your voices heard. Call your congressmen and women and tell them that this needs to be changed in this farm bill coming up. We are in farm bill season 2023 right now. So if you're part of this cohort, of the 2023 cohort, and you're hearing this, rattle those cages. But even if you're in a past cohort after that, rattle those cages because this needs to get changed. This needs to get changed. A veteran is a veteran for life. If you wore that uniform, you had that patch on your shoulder, you are a veteran. You served this country. You deserve access to these preferential programs because we're the men and women who put our lives on the line. Nobody else did that. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now. I'm really upset about this. This has been something that we've been working on at the Vets and Ag Network now for about a year, and we're trying to make this known and trying to make this change in the upcoming Farm Bill. Hopefully we'll see it. All right, the last part of this is, if you do not want to participate, this is question 7, if you don't want to participate in NAP, enter a check mark in the box provided. I elect to opt out of NAP coverage. You don't want to opt out of NAP coverage. NAP coverage can help you with honeybees. Just keep it in place there. It's for catastrophic coverage for certain climactic events and things like that. You're going to sign it, put your title, and the date. All right, so let's get back to, remember the limited resource farmer question on the Triple C 860? Let's talk about that. So this is the self-determination tool. I just wanted to walk you through this so that you can help yourself determine if you're a limited resource farmer. This is the website you're going to go to. Again, the link is in the form itself. This form, so what you're going to do here, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to this tool right here, the fiscal year 2023 online tool. Now, if you're in another cohort, you're going to go to one of those to the one that's after this, whether it's 2024, 5, or so on. But that's where you're going to go. And what it's going to do when you click that link, it's going to bring up this page right here. And you can see that basically this is the self-determination tool. You're going to select your state from the list. You're going to select your county from the list. And then once that happens, so I select my state's Michigan. That'll bring up the county box. I'll click the county box. My county is Luce County. So you can see that here. And once I put that in there, it brings up this box, the step 3 box. What it does is it pulls the information as far as what is a limited resource farmer in your area to determine if you are actually meet that criteria. So you can see there's 2 questions here that you're going to answer once you bring this up. Gross farm sales determination. So in each of the tax years, 2020 and 2021, so the 2 preceding years of taxes, was your direct or indirect income less than or equal to $221,200 per year? You're going to write yes, or you're going to check yes or no for that. Is your adjusted gross income determination, the next one, B, in each of the tax years of 20 and 21, was your total household income less than the Luce County area value of $27,750? So depending on where you're located, these are going to be different. And that's why they have this tool here. They also tell you where you can get this amount from on your IRS 1040. So you're going to click yes or no for each one of those questions, and I just happen to click those. So I put that my adjusted gross income is not less than $27,000, and that so what I ended up getting on this is it says I am not eligible for limited resource. So if I'm not eligible, then I would answer that question on the 860 accordingly. If you are, then there you go. You can print this out. You can bring this in with you to your USDA appointment so that it can show them that yes, you've verified that you meet the criteria or you don't meet the criteria of a limited resource farmer. All right, so once you get that information, you have these forms in hand, 4 forms in hand, print out copy if you're a limited resource farmer or not. Now you're ready to go to USDA and actually fill this, submit this paperwork and get this ball rolling, get your farm number issued to you so that you can start working with USDA. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make an appointment with an FSA service center. Now, FSA service centers are throughout the United States. They're typically at a county level, so you may have to drive a little bit for them. If you live like where I do in the middle of nowhere, I got to drive an hour to my service office. Most of you that live in more populated areas, these are going to be in every single county. And they're very widespread throughout the United States. Typically, the service centers, the FSA service centers, like I said, are going to co-locate some other sub-agencies. So you typically see NRCS with them, sometimes Risk Management Agency as well. Sometimes Rural Development might be there as well. But you're going to at least have an FSA office everywhere. So if you want to find your FSA office, they actually have a service center locator website. The website's down at the bottom here, so you can see that right here. This is the first page that it brings up. And so basically all you're going to do is you're going to click on your state. Move my graphic over there. So I got my state over here. Once I click on my state, it's going to ask you what county you're in. So I didn't show you that picture, but I clicked on the state. It brought up the county graphic. I clicked on the county that I'm in, and this is what it brought up. Serving Luce County, Michigan. These are my 2 offices that are closest to me to go to. And you can see that they have a street map. You can get driving directions. There's a mailing address. It also tells you what other agencies are located in that office. So if I were to say go to the Gladstone office, I'm only going to have rural development in that office. If I go to the Sault Ste. Marie office, I've got Farm Service Agency, I've got the Conservation District, I've got rural development, and I've got NRCS there. And so that's the service center that I go to because it's got the most services at that center, and it's actually the closer of the 2 to me. So that's where I go. That's how I determine it. Now, you want to make an appointment. The reason is it's not like these offices are crazy busy all the time. They're busy during certain times. So there are certain times a year where farmers have to submit our figures for both crop harvest, planting, things like that. And you have to go in to actually make those reports. And so every year, depending on where you live, if you live in, say, like corn and bean country, maybe you live in Nebraska and it's just corn and beans for as far as the eye can see. If you live in Nebraska, the likelihood is that these FSA offices are going to be swamped certain times of the year because every farmer in your area is going in to put what their crop figures are. And if they're all growing the same crops, they're all coming in at the same time. So keep that in mind. That's why having an appointment is so important, because you don't want to be stuck there sitting there for hours just trying to put paperwork in. Make a call, make an appointment, go do your thing with FSA. They'll get your paperwork in and get you all set up. All right, so what do you need for your appointment with FSA? Well, let's talk about all the things that we talked about today. So you're going to need all four of the forms. You're going to need the 80-2047, the 80-20-1026, the Triple C 941, and the Triple C 860. You're also going to need to bring with you proof of your right to use the property. So if you own the property, you're going to need some sort of a legal description of the property. So like a deed, a lease, a contract, or something like that, that says you have the right to use this property. So pretty simple, but you got to bring in something that has a legal description of the property on it, meaning an actual verbal legal description of the property included in it. Personal identification as well. You're going to need your driver's license or some sort of ID in order, and it needs to be, I believe, a federal or state ID is all that they're going to use for personal identification through FSA. So those are what you need to bring with you, and you will be all set to go get your FSA number and start working with USDA. So this is the pathway to start working with USDA. Just like I said, it's just like the military, jumping through hoops. I memean, we all are familiar with that hurry up and wait mentality. I mean, I don't know how many times, all of us were sitting just waiting for hours for something to happen. It just kind of, I'd say, reflect and embrace that mentality when you're working with federal agencies as well. So, just so you all know, real quick, you need to, so if you are using a rental agreement, I'm looking at my notes right now. If you're using a rental agreement, a lease, or something like that, you need to show that you have control of the property for 3 to 5 years. So that's something that's important. So say if you have like an annual lease agreement, USDA is not going to accept that. The reason is that most of the USDA programs, especially the conservation programs, are long-term programs. They're contracts usually that last like 3 to 5 years. So you have to have that control of that land and be able to show that you have control of that land for that time period. So that if you do apply for like the EQIP programs, several of them are multi-year programs, they want to know that you have control of that property for that whole time, that they're not going to install, or you're not going to install a conservation practice and then be gone the next year. They don't want to see that. So you also need to make sure that if you do have rental agreements, lease agreements, contracts, that they do show explicitly that you have rights to that property for a 3 to 5 year period. Okay. All right. I'm going to wrap up today just by talking a little bit about the Vets and Ag Network. Michigan Food and Farming Systems is the organization that hosts the Heroes to Hives program. They all are the organization that helped me and Lacey establish the Heroes to Hives program and found it. And we returned to Michigan Food and Farming Systems as our host organization in 2022. So we're a very tight-knit organization as far as working with veterans. The Vets and Ag Network was established in 2014 as the first statewide farmer veteran network in Michigan. We worked very closely with organizations like the Farmer Veteran Coalition over the last decade, doing a lot of work here in the state, but we are a statewide network of veterans supporting other veterans. We connect you with experts around the state. Now, this is I'm speaking primarily to our Michigan veterans right now, so we are a Michigan-based nonprofit. Heroes to Hives is one of our national programs, or I should say international program. But most of our programming is focused on Michigan. So within Michigan, we connect you with experts. Individuals call me all the time looking for help with certain crops or certain things like that. We're very well connected throughout the state. I should mention that I'm the director of the Vets and Ag Network, including, the national director of the Heroes to Hives program. So the Vets and Ag Network, I founded with a friend of mine, an Army vet friend of mine, and really is a great organization when we're looking for supporting farmer veterans within our state. We offer educational events as well, and we've had kind of a hiatus since the pandemic. Pandemic screwed up a lot of things for many organizations as far as on-ground programming, but we will be doing on-ground programming in 2024 and beyond. And those of you in Michigan that are interested in vacationing to the Upper Peninsula, a lot of those events will be held at my farm here in Newberry. The other thing that we're really well known for, especially within USDA circles, is USDA navigation services. So if you're a veteran in Michigan and you are looking for support to navigate the behemoth that is USDA, we are here to help you. And we have had contracts with USDA for, oh my gosh, I think it's been about 10 years, help specifically for that. So helping veterans navigate the USDA process. I am a USDA customer. I've used most of these programs on my own farm. I've advised a lot of people on these programs as well. And so I know the organization very well, and we have very close connections to state and federal levels of USDA. So when we don't know the answer to something, we can always find out the answer to it. So if you're a veteran that's looking to work with USDA and needs some help navigating that program, and you're here in Michigan, we can definitely help with that as well. So feel free to reach out for those services as well. But I just wanted to mention the Vets and Ag Network as well. If you're interested in staying up to date with us, we do have a Facebook page that we maintain, and you can stay up to date with what's going on in the Vets and Ag Network. All right, so with that, I'm going to say thank you today for being with us on this lecture about utilizing and accessing USDA programs. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you at the next one.